Hello, welcome to another episode of Prove All Things. Want to thank everyone joining us, whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, on our website, or on our television apps. We thank you for joining us, and we are looking forward to anyone watching live. Some of your comments that we'll hear today. I'm joined with co-host Mike James. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, Jeff, doing well. I was up in Wyoming over the weekend. I drove up there beginning on Thursday, and I got back Sunday night, and I baptized 4 people on Saturday up there.
Wow.
So they had about 30 people at the meeting. A couple came from Minnesota, one of them to get baptized, and then we had 3 people coming from over a mountain in Wyoming to get to this particular location in Sheridan. And then we had a bunch of people from Gillette, Wyoming come over to the Sheridan location. So all in all, there were about 30 people. We were in a house, and it was a very unique situation. We had a big water trough out in a garage, and that's where we baptized everybody. So long drive. I think I'm still recovering from it, and I got a little rock in the windshield in Utah somewhere. So my insurance is going to have to deal with that on the rental car there. But very, very interesting weekend.
Is that a new group that we have there then?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Okay.
We connected with them through trying to get some cell groups going up there, and one thing led to another. And when I mailed my letters up there, due to the woman who wanted to get baptized, who was in Graybull, Wyoming, it led to discovering this big group there in Sheridan and Gillette that gets together. It's kind of a bunch of extended family members that make up over 20 people when they're all together. And that's how we got that group going up there in Wyoming. They were already going, but they're affiliated with CGI. Yeah.
Wonderful. It's good to hear that. Last week I was just in Atlanta, but I'm going to be going to Auburndale, Florida for this weekend for this Sabbath. I'm excited about going to Auburndale. I guess completely opposite side of the country. I guess you can't get much further away from those two congregations than there, Wyoming and Auburndale, Florida. But I always love visiting with Morgan Pinkerman, pastor there, and all the folks in the congregation. So definitely look forward to seeing everyone there down in Auburndale, Florida.
Yeah, Jeff, real quick, I almost ran out of gas 2 times in Wyoming because some of those places are few and far between up there. And I ran into snow when I was driving in. So snow was falling. It didn't stick, but there was snow falling.
Yeah. Wow. That is wild. Well, I'm glad you're back safe, and hopefully your recovery will go quickly.
Yeah.
So you got your missionary journeys there. And speaking of missionary journeys, we have Skip Martin with us today, who is our resident, I would say, I don't know, expert or just enthusiast of Saul of Tarsus and all his missionary journeys. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Yeah, that's a good lead in for you, Skip.
It is. You know, you mentioned going to Auburndale and being on the opposite side of the country, and I have a little thing in my notes that Paul's second journey and third, because they were almost the same length, was like him walking from Auburndale, Florida to LA.
Wow.
Yeah. Now there was some shit in there a little ways, but you know, basically that was one of his trips.
Man, you're putting things in perspective for me, Skip, because I was thinking, wow, it was at the end of my journey. I was tired of driving, but now I feel really good about doing a long drive.
Yeah. His first trip. It's funny that I had made these notes. I added them to my I added notes to my notes, but The first journey, and when you start looking at the years that a king lived or reigned, and how long was Paul's, you get all these different opinions, and I'm sure they're researched. But one of the things that I have found is you got to grab one of them. Just pick one, whichever one seems to be the closest to the consensus of 3 or 4 commentaries or experts. But anyway, first journey lasted about 2 years, 45 to 47 ish. And it was 750 miles walking and about 500 on the ship. And that's going both ways. The second journey, 51 to 53 AD ish, again, 3,000 miles about from Auburndale to LA. And the third journey, which we'll talk about some today, 54 to 58 AD, about 2,800 miles. So the whole thing took from 45 to 58 AD, about 13 years. And that's give or take, because I mean, one of the things I found out in my research is that some of these dates are all over the place, and you just got to find the ones that seem to semi-agree. So anyway, I think I told y'all last time, Charles Gross calls me a Paulaholic. I love talking about Paul. I saw. Go ahead.
A lot of commitment there in Paul, no doubt about it. We realize that with all that walking. I mean, that's something, man.
Oh yeah, and I saw a movie the other night. It was just Saul on the road to Damascus. I think it was it was not not a great movie or anything, but it was interesting. But there was one thing that stood out that I almost threw something at the TV. It said, and it was the narrator said, and he changed his name from Saul to Paul. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
One was his Hebrew name, and one was his Greek Roman name. But anyway.
I imagine he must have been pretty skinny for all that walking. That's like, that's a lot of exercise.
Yeah. Boy, it is. It is. It's we got a new dog a few years ago, and I walked her from New York to Miami. I said, "Now you're done."
You walked her from New York to Miami. You mean
you're done? No more walking. You are done. It's a joke.
Okay.
Apparently, a bad joke.
Okay.
I just
yeah. I'm trying to figure out, is that equivalent in like you measured the stuff and you?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out.
No. Sorry, my sense of humor, as you all know, is a little weird.
Yeah. And so if you have any comments about Skip's sense of humor, you can contact him at right there, the email address, and let him know.
I see Blake and Bill Lusenheiter on here. Tarsus always sounds like a good sauce for fish. That's yeah. Bill's got and so does Blake, but Bill's got a sense of humor a lot like mine.
He does. So where are we going today, Skip?
Okay, we're on the third journey. Last time we stopped at the beginning of verse 9 of chapter 19, although we went into 19 a little bit. So today we're going to continue on his third missionary journey. And Jeff, you're kind of in charge here. Yeah, there's the 3. By the way, I was going to mention that. Thank you. You can find his first journey in the chapters Acts 13 through 14, his second journey 15 through 18, and his third journey 18 through 21. It helps me to remember that, because I tell you what, sometimes these things bleed together. I mean, they really do. Sort of like we're going through the prophets in our Sabbath study, and we just finished the non-writing prophets number 15, as opposed to more than 14. And we spend about 2 hours a week. So you can imagine how long, but we're just now getting to the point. Ahab's son is Joram, and Jehoshaphat's son in the south is Joram, and everything gets all, there's 2 kings named Ahaziah, and I'm like, help.
Yeah, those names were really something. They can cause some confusion, no doubt.
Especially when 2 kings have the same name, one in the northern tribes, Israel, and one in the southern tribes, and they were brothers-in-law. So, anyway, I'm sorry. I would say I got off subject, but I haven't gotten on my subject yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, focus.
I'll
Focus.
Sorry. I have such a good time with you guys. All right, Jeff, if you'll start my PowerPoint.
All right. Here we go.
All right.
19:1.
19:1. And we talked a little bit about this last time, and I just want to stay on this for just a second. It says that they passed through the upper country, and that's from the NASB. Most translations show it this way, but the King James says they went by the coast, and they didn't. If you'll put up the map, it's next. You'll see that on his third journey, that's through the middle part of Asia Minor, not the coast. And we talked about this a little bit last time. So he's gone from Antioch, which is down on the it's not the bottom right, but over on the right side, you can see where Antioch of Syria is. And he's gone from there all the way across Asia Minor, which also is known as Turkey, to get to Ephesus. And Ephesus is over on the western part. It's one of the 7 churches that John wrote about, that Christ talked about. Yeah, thanks. Right there is Ephesus. Ephesus was the capital of, I don't know if it was this area. I don't think it wasn't the capital of the whole, because we had all of these different divisions. Rome had divided it into different, you had Phrygia and Galatia, you can see on there, Cappadocia, Mysia, and Asia. But it was the premier city in Western Asia Minor. It was famous for possessing, well, it was famous for a lot of things, but one of the main things was that it was famous for the temple of Diana or Artemis. And she had 1,000, I say she didn't exist. The temple had over 1,000 prostitutes. And in the city of Ephesus, which someday, if you all want to, we can go through that city, step by step. But there were about 5 or 6 brothels in Ephesus. Now, one of the reasons there were so many is that this is where the ships came in. And, the sailors would get off, and I won't get into all of that. But anyway, the shrine to, I'm sorry. Okay.
All right. Yep. Makes sense. Yes.
The temple to Ephesus to Artemis is considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And so let me talk about Ephesus for about 10 seconds. For many years during the Roman occupation, it was considered the second largest city. There were over 250,000 people who lived in Ephesus. Now you can imagine on a weekend or whenever the ships came in, how many people were there. Okay, so now let's just jump down to verse 8, which should be next. Yeah. So when Paul got to Ephesus, and I'm sure he found a place to stay and these kind of things, but he went into the synagogue, which of course was his custom. That's the first thing he would do at any city that he went to. To the Jew first, and then to the Gentile. That principle he carried out throughout his ministry. Only he wanted to meld them together. That was his job. That was his mission. Said he spoke boldly for the space of 3 months. Okay, so they allowed him to be in the synagogue, and let me just put it this way: they put up with him for 3 months and persuading the things concerning the kingdom of God. Now, I'm quite sure that as long as he stayed on that subject, he was okay. He was welcome. It wasn't a problem. But when he got to talking about this man named Jesus, who was the Christ, the anointed one, that's when he got in trouble. Here's how verse 8 is translated in the NASB. Pull it up for me, please. There you go. He entered the synagogue and continued speaking out boldly, for reasoning and persuading them about the kingdom of God, as opposed to disputing and persuading them. And Paul had
so it says he was proving all things to them.
Yeah. And Paul had, being the brilliant apostle or missionary that he was, he had different ways. Okay, he considered his audience. Let me just put it that way. And that's something that every speaker should understand. Know your audience. If you've got an audience of Jews, well, that's a bad example. If you got an audience of Alabama football fans, don't go out and talk to them about how great Arkansas is. Know your audience. And that's what Paul would do. Now, this word reasoning is translated from a Greek word, dialegomai. I can't pronounce these things, but it means to discuss, to reason, or dispute, or to say thoroughly. One of the problems, I suppose is the right word, with the definitions that we read in Greek dictionaries, and I've got 4 really good dictionaries in my Bible program, and then I've got 2 I can't pronounce that word, interlinear Bibles. Okay,
that's a tough word, isn't it?
Yeah. I've got some pretty good sources, but like right here, it says it means to discuss, to reason, to dispute. Dispute doesn't sound like reason, does it? So when you look at dictionaries in Greek or Hebrew, you really need to look at the context to see which of the various meanings works. Okay, so in this case, the context seems to be reasoned. He reasoned with them. He so on. Okay, and now verse 17:2 is next, Jeff. Okay, and Paul, as his manner was, went into them. This is from Acts 17. It's just one example of it was his manner. Every time he went to a city, he went to a synagogue. With a few exceptions, when he went to Philippi, there wasn't one. And I think we talked a couple of sessions ago that it took 10 Jewish men to form a synagogue in any location. We talked about that a few weeks ago. So as it happened, just about everywhere he went, the Jews weren't happy with what he was saying about Jesus. I say Jesus the Christ. Now that's just a habit I've tried to get into, because it's not his last name, it's who he was. He was the anointed one. So anyway, if that bothers anybody, I'm sorry. But when Paul talked about Jesus the Christ, they didn't like it. Now, here's a point that I think is interesting. I don't know if anybody else will. The disciples were first called Christians in Antioch. You all are familiar with that. But Paul used a different word. not that he didn't ever call them Christians, but he used the term the way. And I think that is a really good way to look at who we are, what we are. We are walking in the way. Yes, we're Christians based on everybody's understanding for the last 2,000 years, but Paul calls it the way. And I don't know, and I haven't seen any scriptural evidence whether the term Christian was a good term or a bad term back then. I lean toward it was not an endearing term because they were called Christians in Antioch, which most of the citizens there were Gentile. So anyway, it doesn't matter. It's one of those things, these three little words that we've talked about, I don't know, we don't know, and those are so important when you're studying the scriptures. Go ahead and admit that you don't know. You know, it's okay. I know that our previous church, Bill says walk in the way, but not on the freeway. Our previous church, we had to have an answer for everything. And I think we got ourselves in a lot of trouble.
You know what? Thinking about that, it's better that we don't have answers on stuff, because having answers on these things that we're trying to make up answers can really get us going in the wrong direction on a lot of things, I think. And so it's better to be like, we don't know. But we do know there's a lot of things we do know for sure, but these little things that are out in the weeds or whatever.
Yeah. Well, if the scriptures don't tell us, and you can't get good commentary information about something, you know, it's a we don't know. Now I'm going back to to our Sabbath group, but last Sabbath we were in 2 Kings chapter 3. The very last verse of that, chapter 27, is a very difficult scripture to understand. Y'all can look it up later. I called, well, it doesn't matter. I called 3 or 4 ministers that I know of to ask them what they thought. And all of us came back to the same thing. Well, it could be this. It could be this. Well, it might be that. And, you know, the consensus is we don't really know. And so the way that we do our Bible studies is we start off with we don't know. And then we go to, but here's one way you might look at it. You know, so we're not really nailing anything down. We start off and tell everybody, you know, we don't really know what this means, but here are some thoughts. Anyway, sorry. It's going to be hard to keep me on subject today, guys.
No, that's a very good point. I mean, when we are proving things to people and explaining things to people, not knowing I think is a good part of our arsenal, because that way we don't appear as being cultic or you know. I mean, because somebody who knows it all, you don't trust a lot of times if they act like they know it all. At least for me.
Being able to admit that you don't know. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Actually, that's the smartest way to go. If you don't know, say, you know, I don't know. Don't make something up. So anyway, Acts 19:9, I think, is next. It says that.
Oops, let me go back.
Yeah.
All right.
When some were being hardened and disobedient. Okay, so imagine here Paul is in this synagogue, and he's talking about the kingdom of God. Everything's going good. Boy, everybody's happy. And then he starts talking about the Christ. And that didn't go so well. It says that they were becoming hardened and disobedient, speaking evil of the way. And note, and I know this is just the translators, but they capitalized it. Like I say, it's what the translators did. But they did recognize that when Paul said the way, he was talking about Christianity. But anyway, speaking evil of the way before the people, he withdrew from them. Paul said, okay, I'm done. And this happened just about everywhere he went. On his first journey, when he went up into Galatia and Phrygia and Antioch, Pisidia, Derbe, those places, he would eventually get tired of arguing, and he'd say, "Okay, I'm done with you Jews. I'm going to just talk to the Gentiles." Then he'd go to the next city and he'd start trying to reason with the Jews. They didn't like it. And so he would end up talking to which is what his mission was. It's what God called him to do. But God also wanted him to convince the Jews of the Christ, that Jesus is the Christ, our Savior, and so on. So anyway, so Paul did something a little bit different when he was in Ephesus, because I don't know if he knew he was going to be there for 3 years, but he withdrew from the synagogue and started a school. And it says he reasoned daily in the school of Tyrannus. And I think the next slide is the ruins of that school, if I'm not mistaken, Jeff. Okay. Yeah. This is a section of the city of Ephesus today. And this is where they say, I never have figured out who they are, but they say a lot of stuff, but this is the school of Tyrannus, remains today. Okay. Now in verse 10.
Skip, do you got anything in your research on who this Tyrannus was?
No, it was no.
Okay, I got a note here in my study Bible that he may have been a philosopher at that time, and they used this location. There's one Greek manuscript that has some notes in the column of the manuscript that said Paul was instructing there between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. each day. So again, that's one Greek manuscript, but I just wondered if you had seen anything that in any of the things you looked at.
Yes, but not about Tyrannus himself.
Okay.
It was a school that they had in Ephesus, and the reason they went from 11 to 4 is that was the siesta time. It was a long siesta, but they would use the school while the other guys weren't using the school. And he was there for a couple of years doing that. Now he was in Ephesus for 3 years, but you have to put two scriptures together to come up with that. But we will in a minute. Now, verse 10, Jeff, says, it says, therefore watch and remember, by the space of 3 years, I cease not to warn everyone day and night with tears. This is taken way out of context. It's in the next chapter, but it's when Paul was returning to Jerusalem and he stopped in Miletus and called the elders of Ephesus to come down, and he wanted to say bye. And he was telling them, look, I warned you guys that there's going to be false teachers coming in and all that. And then in verse 10, it says it took place for 2 years. So you got to put the two together, as you do with most scriptures. But he taught in the school of Tyrannus for 2 years, but he was in Ephesus for a total of 3 years. Now,
hey, Jeff, real quick, I just want to address Blake's question about tell us more about this siesta time. Having visited Greece once when I was a kid, what was unusual to me was how late at night dinner would be served. Like we'd sometimes go out to a restaurant and we'd be going at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night to eat dinner. And part of that had to do with this tradition that in the middle of the day, you aren't really active. You aren't doing things. It gets really hot in Greece in the summertime, but I don't know if this tradition just continued for thousands of years. There are other places in the world where you find this, the siesta, as we heard there, in Mexico and different other countries. I know that's a thing that goes on.
Well, 11 to 4 was the hottest time of the day. And just so you know for sure, Mike, what Blake is looking for is something he can take to his board.
Okay, I get that one, Skip. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I know Blake pretty well, and I'm pretty sure that's what he's looking for. That's what he's looking for. Okay. All right. So Paul had all he could stand of the Jews in Ephesus. So he went and he made a deal where he could use the school of Tyrannus for 3 or 4 hours every day. Verse 11 is next, I think.
Right.
Yeah. And it says, and you all are going to recognize this. I know you already know about it because you've probably sent many of them out. It says God wrought special miracles by the hands of Paul, and then he took handkerchiefs or aprons to the sick. And as you all have done, I'm sure, we have a thing in our church. I guess we're not the only ones, where if someone wants to be anointed by an elder and that elder doesn't live there, we take a little piece of cloth, put a little oil on it, say a blessing, and mail it to them. And that's, I don't know if this is exactly where that came from, but I would think that it probably is, or it's part of where that that came from, and we still do that today. So I don't know. Maybe we use cell phones now. I don't really know. I've never mailed anybody an anointed cloth, but I would say you could call someone, say a prayer, talking directly to them. So anyway.
I guess it's probably just whatever the technology is at the time to do that. I know that I'm sure whatever we do, God will recognize the prayers of the saints.
It's the request of the person wanting it that God's going to bless. I mean, not that God's not going to bless what the elder does.
Yeah.
But, we all know that it's based on the faith of the person. Okay, Acts 19:13. Well, that's okay. We don't have to do that. Then certain of the vagabond Jews, exorcists, took upon them to call over them which had evil spirits. So they were going to exorcise, and that doesn't mean run around the block. Exorcise some demons. And this is, I hate to say it, but it's a little humorous. I'm going to skip over that.
Okay, well, I'm going to bring up a question that just came up because we're talking about, and it is in regards to the what Paul was doing, because there's miracles that were performed as part of his work of teaching there, and we have a question. This is, were miracles performed during New Testament times by the apostles more effective than, I guess, contemporary times?
So my quick answer to that is, just looking at when miracles occurred in the Bible, they do not occur all the time. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
There's miracle working going on with Moses for a specific purpose. There's miracle works going on with Elijah and Elisha, again, for specific purposes and what God is doing. And I believe here during the first century church, there was more miracle working power available because of the fact the church had to get going. It had to get started. It had to get some momentum in order for it to sustain itself moving forward. So I believe God allowed a greater part of his spirit to work in the world at that time. Not to say it can't work today, and there are miracles today, but I believe that there was more miracle working occurring at certain times in history because of God's strategic plan and what he was trying to do. That's just my opinion, looking at the scriptures and looking at the history of Christianity throughout the last 2,000 years. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I got a little bit different take, but I see what you're saying there, that the miracles that we have recorded in Acts, they're there, and we have and there's some things that I would definitely we don't really see today. But if we were to write down like the miracles I've seen in my lifetime and write into a book and just only show those and not talk about all the times where nothing happened, you say, oh yeah, look at all these miracles that are happening in the church, because we know of miracles that happen in church today. It's just that we don't maybe report the times when they did not happen, so to say. And she's asking, and Bill says he thinks perhaps it was a great way to fund that. You heal someone, you have a place to stay and a free meal likely. But responding to her question, and I want to see what Skip has to say about this. Were they more effective than contemporary times? So I don't know. I mean, a miracle's a miracle, right? If something happens now, is it as effective as it was then?
It's not a question of frequency. It's her question is about, were they more effective then?
Yeah,
and I would say yes, but what I would bring that over to what Mike was saying. The church was growing. One of the ways that the church grew, one of the ways that God used men in the church, was they would perform a great miracle and it would get someone's attention. And I think that's maybe what Mike was saying.
There's some scripture that makes it apparent that doing something like this was a big deal back then. It would really get people to think that you were of God or gods or something like that.
Yeah, and there's examples of it. We'll probably run it into it in Acts when Paul got bit by a snake, and they thought, oh well, this is going to prove that he's not a man of God, and Paul didn't get sick or anything, and they were like, wow, this is this guy must, and there are other examples like that. And Bill and Blake are kind of going back and forth a little bit, kind of halfway joking about this word vagabond. The word vagabond is translated from, and I have to look at my notes, perie komai, and that's not sparkling water. That's and it means to go about, to wander about, or to rove. And we see these guys, interfering with Paul's work all over the place. They started back in Galatia. They came in and said, hey, look, unless a Gentile is circumcised, they can't be saved. And there was a big meeting in Jerusalem over it. In Acts 15, we're familiar with that. And then when he goes over, and we're not there yet. We're looking 2,000 years back, and we're not there yet. But anyway, when we cross over the Aegean Sea in this study, if you guys have me back, we will see that these guys followed him everywhere he went and caused trouble and got him run out of town and got him stoned and got him whipped and got, all of this stuff happened to Paul a lot of time, or mostly because these vagabond Jews, these wandering Jews that just followed him around. So anyway, okay.
Well, I wonder if these like vagabond Jews or exorcists were like kind of like con people, perhaps, because they would travel around like, hey, we'll remove an evil spirit, or we'll do these, that they were of the kind of that kind of snake oil salesman kind of vagabond kind of they're not really good representations of religion, so to say.
Are you talking about those old westerns, Jeff,
Yeah.
where you see the snake oil salesman going to different towns and
Right.
okay, I get what you're saying. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, in other words, they're making merchandise of what they're doing. Because I can tell you right now, them folks who were exorcists they weren't exercising anything back then, only unless they were, they had God's spirit in God's church. So, so they had
Well,
to be something going on.
I
Yeah,
think
go ahead.
the next thing that's going to come up in this chapter that Skip's going to get to might relate to what you're saying there, Jeff.
Yeah.
And I like Bill's mention of Cher's song, Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves. Okay.
Yeah.
That's an old one. I remember that.
Well, back in, I don't know, chapter 14, 16, somewhere around in there, Paul cast a demon out of a girl that had been given prophecies, and these guys were getting rich off of her.
Yep, I remember that.
And she could no longer do the prophecies, and they were not happy. And they were snake oil salesmen. That's exactly what they were. So that's a good example, Mike. He really got in trouble. But what Mike's talking about is, verse 14 talks about these 7 sons of this Sceva, who was a Jew, and it's Acts 19:14, I think. Back there we go. There were 7 sons of one Sceva, a Jew, and chief of the priests. Now, they're in Ephesus. He was a chief of the priests. I think not a Levite. He was a chief of the priests of probably Artemis, or one of the cults that they had over there. So they're out there trying to exorcise, and the demon actually spoke to him. This is what Mike was saying. In verse 15 through 17 is next. It says, the evil spirit answered and said, look, I know who Jesus is. And I know who Paul is, but I don't know who you all, and just beat the stuffings out of these guys, overpowered them, pulled their clothes off, and they ran out of the house naked and wounded. And I'm sorry that I have to chuckle at that. But and then verse 17 is what we were talking about a while ago. I don't know that Paul intended for this to make a big point, but it did.
Yeah.
Verse 17, this became known to all, both Jews and Greeks who lived in Ephesus. Okay. And fear fell upon them, and the name of the Lord Jesus was being magnified.
Again, I think that fits right in with what we're saying there about the miracle working powers at this particular time, because people seeing this incident and knowing what these people were about, and then realizing, wow, Paul and these people really have the real power. We need to look at what they're talking about. I think that would assist the church in stabilizing and building momentum at this time.
Yeah, many times, particularly in the Old Testament, we would see. Well, let's just use Elijah and the prophets of Baal. Whose God is stronger? Well, obviously, the one true God was stronger and was able to bring fire down from heaven, and everything filled up with water, and it's the same thing happened with Elisha a little bit later, although he wasn't in a battle. They were about to starve to death or die of thirst. We're not in 2 Kings, Skip.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I think of like Janus and Jambres and their snakes. They make some snakes, but Moses' snake eats their snake.
Yeah.
It's like,
great example, Jeff. Yeah.
So it's God's showing that, what they're doing is not the real deal. God's the real deal.
Yep.
Blake is mentioning, wonder if there are still demons like this at work presently. Well, I believe that there are. I believe that the demon power from 2,000 years ago is still in the world today and can manifest. I don't know that it is manifesting as much as it may have back then for this reason. Again, this is just an opinion. Back then, everybody believed in a number of different gods. Mm-hmm. Today, unless you go to India, there aren't as many people who believe in a myriad amount of gods. And I think Satan uses, science, he uses various means to deceive. And I think he can use these manifestations today to get people to believe in an immortal soul and things of that nature. And there's a bunch of TV programs on all over cable that get into some of that. But I think that back then, I think Satan was using this because of the lack of sophistication of many of the peoples that he was trying to manipulate at that time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Okay, have we pulled up? Yeah, okay. 2 words I want to look at in verse, back up one, Jeff, please. Yeah, 2 words I want to look at there. One is the word fear, down in 17. It's the Greek word phobos. It can mean fear, fright, or alarm, but can also describe a healthy awe and respect for God. We've seen it used both ways. This is another example, or maybe a better example, of what I was talking about. When you look at definitions of words, you need to look at the context. Okay, we have a healthy fear of God. Is that fright? Is it alarm? No, it's a healthy awe, healthy respect of God. So when you're defining these words, look at the context. The Greek word translated magnified here, the very last word is a megaluno, meaning to enlarge, lengthen, extol, magnify. That one's a little more obvious. The name of Jesus was being talked about. People were, hey, maybe this guy was is the Messiah. Even the Pharisee. I mean, what are those people? Gentiles. I'm 73, guys. I can, you got to give me a little slack here and let me forget words every once in a while. Yeah, Blake says he thinks a healthy awe. Okay, now verse 18 says that after seeing and hearing what happened to these 7 men, it says many believed, came, confessed, and showed their deeds. Now, we're talking about Gentiles here. We're talking about Gentiles who were worshiping all of these pagan gods. We used to read the word Baal a lot, and that's actually, and I'm trying really hard to pronounce it the way it's supposed to be pronounced. It's Baal. And it's, I've been pronouncing it Baal for 40 years. And now I found out a few weeks ago that it's Baal. But anyway, they came and showed their deeds, and many of them burned their books. They had a book burning ceremony. And the books that they burned were about 50,000, were worth about 50,000 pieces of silver. Whole bunch of folks, because what they saw in the works of God through Paul, and the demons being cast out of that person, they repented, I think is the word, isn't it? They repented of their paganism and burned up about $50,000 worth, 50,000 pieces of silver, which I didn't calculate that. Bill Lucenide can probably give us an idea of what 50,000 pieces of silver was worth back then. But anyway, so we know what believed means. It says they believe 3 things: They believed, they confessed, and they showed their deeds. Three things that these people, Bill says it'd be around $1 million worth of silver. Thanks, Bill. In today's money. So these things, I mean, God is working through Paul and is really getting these people's attention in Ephesus. And remember, he stays there for 3 years, and he's not real popular with the Jewish group. Is there. So we find in verses 18 and 19 that these people confessed that they'd been dabbling in magic, and they repented of those sins, and they burned their books. And it added up to a large expense. So go to the next scripture, please. Next. Okay. So what happened? Mightily grew the word of God and prevailed. In a city of 250,000 people, of which I'm going to throw a number out, 200,000 of them were not God worshipers. They were pagans, and they worshipped Diana, Apollos. They worshipped the Greek gods in this city, and the biggie was this Artemis, also known as Diana. But so it says the mightily grew the word of God and prevailed. It's kind of interesting. This is the opposite of healing someone. These were these guys that were out trying to show off and cast a demon out of this girl, and the demon jumped on them and beat the stuffings out of them. It says, verse 21, after these things were ended, Paul proposed in the Spirit, and when he passed through Macedonia and Achaia to go to Jerusalem, saying, after I've been there, I must also go to Rome. If you'll show the next one is a map. Yeah, you can see where Ephesus is there over on the western side of right in there. But Paul decided to stay in Ephesus. He purposed to go on over to Macedonia, but decided, no, there's still a lot of work to be done in Ephesus. So he sent, verse 22, Timothy and Erastus. So he sent to Macedonia. Okay, so he sent them across the Aegean Sea to begin a work over there. But he himself stayed in Asia for a season, about another year. But now he's going to get in the way of the economy. Don't mess with the economy. You can talk about their religion. You can tell them, hey, there's this Jesus, the Christ guy, but don't mess with the money. So, and the next verse is 23. It says that there occurred no small disturbance concerning the way. Again, Paul's talking about the way that we're supposed to live. He's teaching them that Apollos is a false god, that Artemis is a false god, that Diana is a false god. And it was really that Artemis and Diana part that really got him in trouble. Because one of the chief parts of their economy was making silver statues. Most of the statues were of Artemis or Diana. And Demetrius wasn't happy about this because he was making a bunch of money casting these little idols and sometimes big idols. He made silver shrines of Artemis, Diana, and was bringing no little business to the craftsmen. He had people working for him, and they were all making money. And he saw that Paul was affecting his business. All these guys and gals that burned their books and repented and maybe were converted. They're not buying these little silver statues anymore. And this is going through Ephesus, and these guys are not even a little bit happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
So these he gathered together. So Demetrius gathered together with the workmen of similar trades, other people that were doing, casting statues of Apollos and so on. And he said to them, hey guys, we're making our living off of this business, off of making these statues and shrines and stuff. And go to the next verse. So they make a case that Paul has disrupted idol manufacturing all over Asia Minor, not just in Ephesus, all over Asia Minor. Because if you remember, you've got the 7 churches, you've got Colossae, Laodicea, and Ephesus, of course, and all of these guys' business is being interrupted by what Paul is being that he's teaching, and they ain't happy about it. So it says this Paul, that guy, has persuaded and turned away many people, saying that Artemis is not a god, Apollos is not a god, because they're made with hands. And we have a God, as you all know, that we can't see. We can see what he does, but we can't see him. They believed in gods that they could see. Okay.
So a question about that. So that trade, I guess that trade did eventually kind of go away, right? Where idols of all these pagan gods weren't being made. So how quickly was it? How quickly was it though when they started making the idols of the saints and of Mary and stuff? Is what I want to know. Like how quickly did that trend? How did that trend? How did that transition occur?
That was what 300-400 years later, I guess.
Yeah, but somebody again eventually figured out how to make money doing the same things.
No, you're right. You're right, Jeff. I wrote a booklet on the Virgin Mary and the saints. It should be published very soon. And when I did the research on this, I looked into what was going on in Medjugorje over in Bosnia-Herzegovina. There was a apparition of the Virgin Mary there, and the kids who had seen her, what happened in the years after this sighting of the Virgin Mary is a little economy grew up. It became a vacation spot for many Catholics. They would sell various trinkets and Virgin Mary pictures and Virgin Mary statues and things of that nature. And it helped the economy of this city of Medjugorje in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And people were upset if you had an issue with that. But we see that this type of thing has happened throughout Christian history also, in the Catholics and in the Orthodox churches where they have these grottos and these different locations where pilgrims will come to visit.
It's just interesting to me that all the stuff that was going on before this, it somehow ended up being Satan was able to just like we'll just shift this to something else, and they'll just keep on making these things, but we'll call them something else. It's very very interesting.
He's good at that manipulation, man. Yeah.
And we're easily manipulated. Humans are. So Demetrius has gotten all of these guys all hot and bothered about what Paul has been doing. And verse 26, not just in Ephesus, but almost throughout all Asia. UPS was alive and well back then, shipping these idols to different places. Sorry, little facetiousness there. But the biggie is in verse 27. He says, so that not only is our craft in danger, but the temple of the great goddess Diana should be despised. By whom? By these newly converted Christians. and one pagan turns into a Christian, two pagans turn into Christian, and so on, and it's affected their business. And it says that the whole world, or all of Asia, worships Diana, worships Artemis, and this guy Paul is really messing things up. Okay, I think I have a mock up of the Temple of Diana. Yeah, it was considered one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, and there are other pictures that are even better. Right now, there's like 4 or 5 columns left. That's it. I didn't put a current, but each of those columns, and I don't know about 100% of them, but let's say a lot of them were donated by kings of other countries, and they were decorated with gold and jewels. And I mean, this place was magnificent, and it was about I don't know, a couple of miles outside of Ephesus, all by itself. And something that was interesting about Ephesus is, I don't know if you're familiar with hot springs during the gambling mafia era, but if you were in trouble, Al Capone is out to get you. You could go to hot springs and stay safely, and they couldn't touch you while you were there. Now, you couldn't live there the rest of your life. There was some kind of an unwritten rule of how long, but it was said of the Temple of Artemis that if someone was out to get you, you had wronged someone, you could flee to the Temple of Artemis, which also was a bank, by the way. I mean, they did everything in this place. 1,000 prostitutes, but you could flee to here, and or if you were within a bow shot of the temple, they couldn't touch you. So that's something kind of interesting about this. So Paul is
and I guess whatever Paul said kind of worked, because it's not there anymore.
That's right. That's right. Well, if you all had me back on, there's a reason why it's not there anymore.
Yeah,
and we can talk about that the next time. But so Paul is attacking Diana of the Ephesians, or Artemis of the Ephesians, and Demetrius and these guys stirred up the people, and they had a hearing in the great Colosseum. Verses 28 and 29 here. Yeah. When they heard these sayings, okay, they are the makers of these idols. When they heard these sayings, they were they were hot, and they cried out, saying, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians." Now, I've been to a lot of basketball games, and I can kind of see how this is going.
Yeah.
And the whole city was filled with confusion. Paul, on the one hand, is talking about the Christ, and these, the priests of Apollos and Artemis and so on are talking about great Diana, and so the city's filled with confusion. And they caught a couple of the converted. Well, I don't know if these were Jews or converted Gentiles, but Gaius and Aristarchus, men of Macedonia. Okay, they had come over across the Aegean Sea to join with Paul. They were Paul's companions in travel, and they rushed with one accord into the theater. These are the people that were mad. Now, next, I have a picture of the theater. This is the great theater in Ephesus. It held about 25,000 people. You could hear a whisper at any point in this from somebody down at the very bottom. They had gladiator fights, they had plays, this was a big deal. And it held 25,000 people, and I think the next one is a drawing. I hope I got that in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is what it would have looked like. You see the tall building that's there. Go back to the slide before. You can see a little of it down there on the right there. You can see a little of that. So now go back to the next one. So this thing would hold 25,000 people, and it was a biggie. It was a big deal for the biggest one in Western. Yeah, Bill wants to know how much season tickets were. Well, if it's anything like our professional sports today, a family of four couldn't afford to go. So anyway, the next one or the one before.
That's the last two.
There, that one.
Right.
This is what remains of the great theater in Ephesus, and this is it's the largest in Asia Minor. It held, as I said, 25,000 seats. It had 66 rows of seats and so on. I'm not going to get into all of that because we're running out of time. And then it once looked like this drawing that Jeff put up a minute ago. And so Paul's disciples go on to the next two slides. I think it's verse 30.
That's all I got. Oh, there we go. Right there.
Right there. Okay. And so Paul wanted to go in there. He wanted to go in and defend himself. And his disciples said, you're not going to last long in this crowd. Now, granted, God could have easily kept him from being killed, but his disciples were saying, let's not risk this. And certain of the chief of Asia, which were his friends, okay, sent to him, desiring him that he would, he'd come. We want to have a hearing, Paul, Saul. Some therefore cried one thing, some another. It was all this crazy confusion. And the more part knew not why they were there. Oh, everybody's going to the theater. We need to get down there. Why? I don't know. But everybody's going to the theater. So, it's almost humorous what is happening. It was just an angry mob. Now, the next verse 33, they drew poor Alexander out. He was one of Paul's guys. And the Jews putting him forward. Okay. Remember the Jews? They weren't happy about this either. And Alexander beckoned with his hand and would have defended himself. But they knew that he was a Jew. And for 2 hours, they cried out, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians." Now, I've been known to yell a little bit at basketball and football games. I couldn't yell for 2 hours. Straight. And they weren't making any sense. Well, great is Diana of the Ephesians. Well, what's so great about her? We don't know, but she's great. And so in comes the town clerk, who apparently was a man of great honor. Verse 35. He comes in and he convinces the people. And this reminds me of who was it that trained Paul? Who was the
Gamaliel?
Yeah, Gamaliel. It reminds me of what Gamaliel said. Said, look, guys, if this is of God, there anything you can do about it. If it's not of God, it ain't gonna last anyway. And this is kind of what the town clerk is saying. He says, hey, wait a minute. What man is there that doesn't know that the city of Ephesus is a worshiper of great Diana? These guys can't, they can't do anything. And then mention something that's interesting. And the image which fell down from Jupiter, what they believed, a meteorite fell a few miles outside of Ephesus. And the local people had regarded it as a gift from the god Jupiter. So that's what the town clerk is referring to. And in verse 36, it's the next one. We're almost through. It says, seeing that then that these things cannot be spoken against. Okay, so he's saying, look, everybody worships Diana. These 50 people over here aren't going to be able to do any damage whatsoever. Even if there's 100, even if there's 1,000, there's 250,000 people here, and and that's what he's saying. And so you need to be quiet. You don't do stupid stuff. Don't act so rashly. For you've brought here these men which are neither robbers of churches nor blasphemers of your goddess. They're a non-issue. And the next verse, which I think is kind of interesting, he tells them, he says, look, if you want, you can sue Paul, take him to court. If Demetrius and the craftsmen which are with him have a manner against any man, the law's open. They're deputies. You can arrest him. Let them, I'm sorry, I got the hiccups. Let them accuse one another. But, back up. But if you inquire anything concerning other matters, it's going to be talked about in the court. You're not going to bring a bunch of people in here and kill them or beat them or whip them. If you have a problem with what they're doing, take them to court, which tells you that they had quite a legal system back then in Ephesus.
Mm-hmm.
And so he convinces them in verse 40 that if they keep it up, they're going to bring Rome's wrath down on them. Boys, we don't want a big disturbance here. We don't want Rome coming down here. So in verse 40, he says, we're in danger to be called in question for this day's uproar, there being no cause whereby we may give an account. In other words, I think what he's saying is Rome doesn't care that Paul's talking about this Jesus guy.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care. And they don't care that you guys worship Diana. Rome just doesn't care. And then in verse 41, it said, and when he had thus spoken, he dismissed the assembly. Well, that's what I got. I've enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
Very good, Skip. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting.
Well, Paul is a pretty interesting guy. He was able to stir up trouble everywhere he went. Mm-hmm. He was good at it.
Yeah, there's a lot of different themes in this chapter that you find throughout the book of Acts in different places. And it was a great chapter to look at today, no doubt.
It was.
Yeah. I guess one thing to think about is our Christianity as disrupting to the society as what he did. Can we, have that impact? Because who knows?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of things. Just one day it will happen, right? Where people will, they won't be selling Christmas trees anymore, I guess.
Yeah, I received a video from our contact in Pakistan where he was out preaching with a couple of his buddies, and a fellow with a Muslim with a gun shot 3 bullets into the ground and was arguing for them to get out of there. But luckily, other Muslims who were there got in between them, and both of them ended up going to jail. And then this guy asked for forgiveness because his family realized he was going to get in trouble for wielding this gun out in public and firing bullets. So our guy forgave the guy. But yeah, we've got a lot of people out there who are in situations like Paul is right here in the world today. Yeah.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I don't know if y'all ever had him on here, but Michael Deering has been to India a couple of times and has a ministry over there. And
no, you know what? We do need to get Michael on here. It's been one of our goals. He's been on Bring on the Sabbath before, but not on Prove All Things.
Yeah,
I'll send him a note.
Yeah, he's great. I noticed somebody. What happened to it? Bill Lusenhide said Hot Springs equals city of refuge. Yes, it is, Bill. And we have a feast there, and I'm going to Hot Springs, and you all have to leave me alone. So nobody can come to Hot Springs to attack me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, Skip.
So that's it. I
right.
do think Michael would be a great guest for you all.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Again, it's very, very lot of good themes here. We glad again always to have you on, Skip. Do you have any final words before we leave? We are running a little overtime here, but that's all right.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
nah, that's okay. It's good stuff. But anything you want to close us with before we leave today?
No, I just, as I said in the very first one of these, this is number 7, by the way. Y'all had me on here 7 times.
Wow.
That Paul was the perfect evangelist. He had the training while he was still a Pharisee, and then he had training by Jesus the Christ himself, and then he went through the worst of the worst, as he was doing his job, and he never quit. I mean, he was quite a man. So, nope, that's it for me.
All right. Well, we appreciate you having you on.
I appreciate it.
We will just say goodbye to everybody watching. Appreciate all the comments, and we'll see everybody again on our next episode.
Okay. See y'all. Thank you.